Hi everyone, welcome back to This Book Belongs to Pam, and today we are going to be talking about all of the books that I read for the month of September. I have been trying to film this video for a couple of times now, and I don't know what it is, but I just hate everything that I film nowadays. But that aside, let's chat about all the books that I read in September. I have my phone over here just to review my Storograph because September, has been over for like over 3 weeks now, maybe 2 weeks. So I need my refresher. The first book that I actually finished in September is Para Kay B by Ricky Lee, but I actually already talked about this in my August wrap-up because it was part of Akdang Pinoy. So go check that out. Spoiler alert, I gave that one 4.25 stars. Now, the first book that I started and finished in September is Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. Ali Hazelwood and we go way back. And by that, I mean I have read every single thing that she has written, or at least published. And there were ups and downs, but mostly I have enjoyed my time, I'm not gonna lie. Which is why I have this need to keep on consuming everything that she publishes, because I kind of want to stay on top of authors who I'm kind of caught up with, and Ali Hazelwood is one of those. So I did read Not in Love, and I actually really enjoyed this one. In Not in Love, we are following Rue. She is a biotech scientist, I think that's what she's called. She has this research on food and the shelf life of food, basically trying to extend the shelf life of food because she has grown up with a lot of food insecurity. Her childhood has not been easy, and this is sort of like culminated in her wanting to like change the world with this technology that she's researching. So she's doing pretty good at that. She works at this company, like a scale-up or a startup called Klein, owned by Klein, her boss is someone that she looks up to, because her boss was the first one to sort of like validate her idea and tell her that, oh, you have potential, girl, come work for me. And then one day she's on the app and she's looking for a one-night stand, as one does, and she meets Eli. Eli is a venture capitalist, I think is what he's called, but she doesn't know that. They have this moment, they feel that spark when they first met, but something happened. An incident happened that kind of stopped the date in its tracks, and they're kind of left with this, you know, that feeling of you've been waiting for it and you're almost there, and then it stops. It's kind of like edging, I suppose. So they're left at this state and they're kind of like having this lustful feelings for each other, but then they have to separate because Rue has this rule where I'm not gonna date anyone more than once because I'm just all for one night stands. I can't do men right now. I have to focus on my research, which is you go, girl. And then the next day, they find out that Klein, the company, is actually being sold because they had this debt and all, just like mumbo jumbo business stuff. So they're actually being sold to this group, and lo and behold, who's part of this group? Eli. So yeah, that is sort of the lay of the land, I suppose. What do I think about this book? Not in Love is so different tonally from all of the other Ali Hazel books that I've read. Usually her formula goes like smart female character in STEM who's kind of like quirky, has her own thing, kind of clumsy, or actually very clumsy most of the time. And then you have this guy who is also in the same field as the female lead, and then he's like at the top of his game. He's considered the best of the best in that field. He has a lot of authority, a lot of sway, brooding, he's grumpy, all of those things. Obviously he's insanely attractive, and then obviously they have this meet cute, or they have this sort of like rivalry that's gonna happen within their workspace. But Not in Love is quite different in the sense that our characters, first of all, they're not in the same field. The guy's in finance, venture capitalist, and then our girl is biotech. But yeah, our female lead, she's not like this clumsy, quirky character. She's really, I don't know, she's really different. It's a lot more serious. I think morose, is that the right term to use for this one? It kind of feels like it. But they're not overly on the comedic side of Ali Hazelwood's spectrum of writing. Like, obviously there are some witty banter, but they're not overly trying to be funny. They're not overly trying to be quirky and comedic. And I kind of like that. It feels a lot more natural. This book does discuss a lot of like serious topics. and I think it was like done in a very organic and natural way. And I love how we kind of explored those topics within the conversations that they had with each other, which made me really appreciate the relationship that we're building here, because it feels grounded on something other than just like pure lust. We did have that initial attraction, but they were thrust immediately into the situation, and they kind of had to get to know each other a lot more than just the physical, which I really enjoyed. I gave this book 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it, as you can tell. The next 3 books that I'm going to be talking about are part of this Fairy Loot vlog that I did. The first one being Foxglove King by Hannah Witten. This is, I guess, a fantasy romance where we are following Lore. She is kind of a unique person in a sense that she was born with this thing called that magic. So she has the ability to harness the energy from dead things, be that people, animals, even like inanimate objects, because you know raw materials are like dead things. It's definitely frowned upon to use death magic, kind of like obvious. Lore and her adoptive family are part of this, I guess, gang whose like main job is to push for poison. So poison in the form of like different flowers and stuff, like foxglove. And the reason why poison is such a big deal is because it's kind of used in the same way as drugs, where if you take just enough poison, like the perfect amount of poison, you can get close to death, and with that you might get the ability to harness death magic, or at least feel the buzzing effects of having that power. Because the only way to get that magic is to have a near-death experience. But you know, our girl Lore, she was born with it. She's born different. One day while she was on her, you know, usual spying drug cartel mission, she got caught performing death magic. Obviously, she was thrown into jail, and she thought she was gonna rot in prison for the rest of her life. But little did she know that the Preskmore, which is this priest order that handles everything related to death magic, has different plans for her. They want her to, one, do this thing that they can't do, but apparently only she can do with her level of death magic, but also they want her to spy on the prince, because they think the prince is colluding with this other country to overthrow the current king. So yeah, that is kind of like a long-winded way of saying the plot. Now, this book, I am kind of torn with this book because this did atmosphere so fucking good. If you look at this cover, this is what the book feels like. It's very gothic. It has a lot of like dark elements to it. It has a lot of church imagery, the monarchy. So there's a lot going on in terms of the gothic imagery, and I really love that. I really enjoyed it, but it kind of fell flat on everything else. I feel like the characters were quite underdeveloped, and the plot felt like a little bit stilted in a way. The only thing that really kept me going with this book is that I was so interested in the magic system. Like, it was so different, death magic, and how it manifests and how you can manipulate it. I loved the concept, and that really kept me going. And I think the mystery part also helped as well, because I kind of want to find out what the heck is going on. Like, why did Lore, you know, have these powers from birth, and what is this big conspiracy thing that is going on? I was so curious about that. So in a way, really, that kind of kept me going, and I enjoyed that. And I'm curious enough about the ending and the unanswered questions that I would read the sequel to this fantasy series. So yeah, that is the Foxglove King. I gave it 3 stars. If you want my full real-time thoughts, that will be in the vlog, link down below. So yeah. Foxglove King by Hannah Witten. The next book in that Fairy Loot vlog is Sing Me to Sleep by Gabby Burton. So this is YA fantasy from Fairy Loot. In this book, we are following Saoirse. She is a siren, and she has all of these great powers controlling water. She can obviously seduce people into their death, as you know how sirens usually are portrayed. But there's a big problem here. Sirens are supposed to be extinct from their island. Now, she is now forced to hide her identity and kind of assimilate into this island and pretend that she's just this regular fairy, because in this world fae is like the top dog, and then you've got some humans and some witches. Sirens are supposedly extinct, they're illegal essentially, but yeah, that is her predicament. We start this book on this examination. She has been training her whole life for this examination to become a soldier for this kingdom, and because she wants to get all of the perks, like the money to afford, you know, hiding herself and her family, to send her adoptive sister to school. She just wants a cushy life as a soldier. But you know, things don't always turn out the way you want them to. Something happens. She has been threatened, blackmailed, and she has to find a way to figure out, okay, who is this person blackmailing me and why? So she accepts this job to become the princess bodyguard because she thinks the blackmailer is from the palace. I was definitely intrigued by the plot, and I was really curious about the whole siren thing and how that plays into the story, because I don't think I've read a book where the siren is the main character. I wanted to like this so much, but unfortunately I really didn't. Writing wise, it was so incredibly repetitive. We are in Saoirse's head all of the time. She is always thinking about, oh, this person is blackmailing me, and this is what I know, evidence 1, evidence 2, and then 5 pages later, oh, I'm being blackmailed, and you know, this is the evidence 1, evidence 2. She keeps repeating that again and again and again throughout the book without any additional context, additional information, additional thoughts and feelings added towards it, because I understand that obviously she's trying to solve this mystery and she's not gonna have all the answers and she's gonna be thinking about this all the time, which is fine. I get that, but I feel like we as readers, we need to be given a little bit more each time she repeats that, because then it's just repetitive. It's just the same thing over and over again. The writing was also quite straightforward, and that's not always a bad thing. But I feel like with this one, because it was repetitive and then it was also straightforward and quite, I guess, simple in writing, it felt incredibly boring for me to read. I feel like we got bits and pieces of everything. We've got a little bit of like lore, of world building, of character development, a little bit of like plot and political intrigue, but those little pieces, they don't really add up to a good book. In my opinion, the ending itself, it was so rushed, and I feel like it was riddled with plot holes, and that is primarily because Saoirse, our siren main character, she's very OP. She's very overpowered from the very beginning of the book. Like, she has been introduced with all of these great powers. Like, she can control minds, she can make you do things, she can manipulate you into killing yourself, she can control water. She has all of these amazing powers. And obviously the only thing holding her back was that she had to hide a lot of it. But then in the ending, when everything was revealed already, and obviously she has free reign of using her powers, obviously for the drama, we had to make her struggle a bit, we had to make her lose a little. But that's kind of hard to believe when you have such a powerful character. I feel like the restraints in the limits in her power was not properly explored in a way that makes us feel that the things that are happening on the page are realistic. One thing that I did appreciate about this book though is the fact that we had a main character who is intentionally unlikable. Obviously as a siren, she's kind of like this anti-hero type of character because she has this intense desire to take lives, and that's just part of who she is as a person. And I like that we're exploring those kinds of main characters, because usually we have, you know, main characters who are always trying to do good by the world, trying to save the world and whatnot, and she's mostly concerned really with her own agenda, which is refreshing to read. Will I read the sequel? I'm not in a rush. I'm not in a rush to pick it up, honestly. I feel like I needed a little bit more, especially with the characters. Some of the characters felt like cardboard cutouts. Like, they feel like this stereotypical character that was just there to push forward a specific part of the plot, and that was just not enjoyable for me. So I don't think I will be picking up the sequel anytime soon, and I will be unhauling this copy of Sing Me to Sleep. So yeah, I gave this one 2.5 stars. That is Sing Me to Sleep by Gabby Burton. The final book that I read for that Fairy Loot reading vlog is The Forest Grimm by Catherine Purdy. Now this book is so fun to read. This is a reimagining, I guess, of the Grimm's fairy tales. They were kind of like smooshed together into this one like fantasy story, and I really enjoyed it. In this book, we are following, what is her name? Clara? Yeah, we're following Clara as she embarks on this journey to find her mother. Her mother was taken, absorbed by the Grimm forest because of this curse that has been put into their town. So she sets off to find her mother together with one of her childhood friends, Axel, who is there to find his fiance. So they set off for that journey, and you know, lots of twists and turns because the forest isn't really kind to people from their neighborhood because of this curse that happened. I think that's really all you need to know going into this book. I had a lot of fun. This book is fairy tale turned twisted tale, and I really enjoyed that. The setting and the atmosphere that the writing paints for you really set the tone for me, and it really transported me into this whimsical, magical forest filled with this moving trees and changing, you know, pathways and a bunch of like creatures that are questionable. I really enjoyed that. The writing itself had a bit of like repetitiveness to it as well, but compared to Sing Me to Sleep, the writing in this one was so much better in terms of the words used, how the words sound in my head, and that made the reading experience so much smoother for me despite the repetitiveness. The way that they also incorporated the different Grimm characters, Rapunzel, Cinderella, you have Hansel and Gretel. The way that they were incorporated was really fun and I think really creative, and I love that. What I did not see coming was that this book is a series. Yes, it's a series. Like, I was already really satisfied by the not so happy ending, which kind of, you know, tracks this being like a Grimm fairy tale reimagining after all. And I liked how things were a little bit unsatisfying and it's not happily ever after per se. I really enjoyed that, but then she just had to hit us with a cliffhanger. I'm not really mad about it, because I am very curious about how the next story is going to progress. But yeah, I did enjoy the characters and I did enjoy the atmosphere. I gave this one 3.75 stars, and I will definitely be reading the sequel. That is The Forest Grimm by Hannah Witten. So again, if you want to see all of my thoughts on the last 3 books, that's going to be in the Fairy Lit Reading vlog, link down below. Next book that I read is thankfully a break from all of the fantasy that I've been reading. I read No Exit by Taylor Adams. So this is a thriller book. The story starts with our main character, Darby. She's driving along this mountain roads on the way to her mother's house because she just found out that her mother has cancer and she's gonna undergo some surgery. So she's really rushing. She wants to get there before the surgery. Unfortunately, she's in the middle of a snowstorm. The roads are slick. She doesn't have snow tires on. It's very scary. She gets stuck in this blizzard and she has to stop at this rest station at this plaza. In this rest stop, she meets a couple of different people and they just spend some time together, trying to wait out the snow, trying to listen to the radio for any news because there's no like cell reception. So while waiting, she went out to try and find some cell reception. She kind of sees something in one of the cars, in one of the vans that's parked there. She sees a little girl inside a van that seems to be, you know, kidnapped. So she kind of goes into this panic because obviously, oh my gosh, what is she gonna do? She just saw some kidnapped little girl. She has no cell reception. She can't call 911. And she now realizes that inside the diner, one of those people is responsible for kidnapping this little girl and she doesn't know which one. And that is all you need to know going to this book. This book has me, I had fun, period, with this book. This book read to me like a so ridiculous, it was so entertaining action thriller movie. I know that this book has been adapted to a series and I would be so down to watch that. The things that happen in this book are so comically unrealistic that I just went along with it. I just accepted everything, like literally threw any like notions of logic and science and physics out the window because I just wanted to have fun reading this book, and I did have a lot of fun. It's definitely a fast-paced thriller and there's a lot of like twists and turns, stupid twists and turns, but twists and turns nonetheless. So it's really good for binge reading, or if you're in a slump and just want something super fast-paced that's just gonna keep you interested. I highly recommend this book for that reason alone. But overall, it wasn't really like a good book. I still enjoyed it, so I don't know if that's a good review or not. If you want a fast-paced thriller, this one's for you. I gave this one 3 stars. That is No Exit by Taylor Adams. I went back to fantasy and I read The Night Ends with Fire by KX Song. Now this one is kind of like a loose buddy read with Vanessa from Read with Dr. B. We did this buddy read thing over at Storygraph. I actually haven't looked back to see if they added in their comments because I read it quite early. I think I read it first among the group. This one is a fantasy Mulan retelling, or kind of reimagining, and it is certainly that. Like, the beginning part of this book like really follows the Mulan concept, except that you've got some fantasy twist in there. You've got some Chinese folklore and magic systems baked into the world and into the story, but it is essentially is Mulan. We're following what is her name again? Maylene. Maylene is posing as a guy to join the army because she wants to escape being, you know, sold off and married to this random old dude just to keep her family afloat. So she joins the army pretending as a guy, and obviously she meets someone, like the prince. Actually, she meets the prince and they fall into this friendship situation, but obviously she's hiding this big secret, and yeah, it just follows that. There's magic in it that's a little bit complicated, but it has to do with like spirit realms and stuff, and things just happen. A lot of things happen in this book that I don't really need to like outline here. So starting off with the things that I really enjoyed the fantasy elements in this book. I like the magic and how it was incorporated. I like how it's Chinese folklore, or I guess Chinese history and myths have been, you know, used and sort of like changed a little bit. I was decently invested in the plot and I was really curious about how things are gonna unfold, and that kept me turning the page. But unfortunately, the storytelling style, the characters, the writing itself, I guess, it wasn't really to my taste. The writing for me lacks a certain emotional depth. It reads to me like bullet points. It feels like an outline of a book where the author has yet to add the things that make the book feel something. The things that make the book more than just, you know, a list of events that's happening. And I really thought that this book lacked that. I didn't really feel anything for any of the characters. Like, I was invested in the plot, like what's happening next, what's the twist, what's, you know, whatever. But the characters itself, like, I couldn't really care. And another thing that I didn't really like is how the pacing was done. I kept getting whiplash because the character and where they are in this world is kind of like all over the place. Like, for example, one day they're having fun, they're drinking beer, whatever, and then the next scene, without even really transitioning it through the writing, it's literally like a break in the paragraph, and then the next paragraph is them in the thick of the battle. Like, literally in the middle of the battle, people are dying left, right, and center. And that could work, honestly, for some key moments, but if it's done throughout the book, it makes the book feel like choppy. Like, I kept getting confused, like, wait, did I miss a paragraph or like a couple of pages? Did I turn 2 pages instead of 1? Because why are we suddenly in the middle of a waterfall and, you know, falling down and dying? I don't know why. A lot of like repetitive dream sequences has happened, and it's kind of annoying, especially coupled with the, you know, the whiplash that I've been getting from the pacing. And that just really left me kind of tired after reading the book, but not in a good way. But, you know, I did enjoy the plot. Some of the characters warmed up to me a little bit. The ending left me quite intrigued. I really like the ending. I will likely pick up the sequel when it comes out. I gave this one 3 stars. That is The Night Ends in Fire, or The Night Ends with Fire by KX Song. The next book that I'm going to talk about is actually a manga series. I'm just going to talk about all of the volumes I read in September because it's kind of hard with manga to like pick out specific volumes. So I read Blood on the Tracks by Shuzo Oshimi. I read volumes 1 to 9. This is a horror thriller, psychological horror thriller, and she's definitely psychological. In this book, we are following a high school student, Sei. he has one heck of a mother who is kind of controlling, very clingy, very protective. His mother is borderline obsessed with him. Something big happens in his first volume, and Sei, as a result, has his world shattered. He doesn't know what to think. He's starting to lose his mind. He has a lot of trauma from this incident, which then opens up this kind of worms that apparently has happened since his childhood. And that is really all you need to know about this book. This book is eerie, creepy, like it's haunting me. The face of the mother in this book is just seared into my brain. And initially I was reading this book at a cafe, you know, as light reading while waiting for my friends, and this is not the kind of book that you read at a cafe. This series has a lot of subtle character development, which I really like. The first volume itself really set the tone and gave you a really good look into each of the characters in the book. And I audibly gasped at what happened at the end of volume 1, and I was definitely intrigued, so I kept on reading. And so far this book has really done a great job of talking about parental abuse and emotional abuse and the ramifications of it. Obviously there's this whole lens of horror which makes things a lot more visceral, a lot more in your face, when, you know, usually with abuse they're kind of like hidden. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that we get to see visually what that kind of looks like. And the drawing is just so good. The illustration really speaks to the story that we're trying to tell with this manga. And yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm definitely continuing it. I have read up to volume 9, and so far I think my favorite is it volume 5? That's my favorite. Actually, I gave volume 4. I really enjoyed volume 4. I thought this one got me so scared, and I just had a lot of like goosebumps all over while reading it. So yeah, that is Blood on Tracks. These are my ratings for all the volumes, the individual volumes. I'll just give it an average rating at the end when I finish reading this manga series. But yeah, that is Blood on the Tracks by Shuzo Oshimi. Next book that I read Credence by Penelope Douglas. That was a choice. I think I wanted to read something different. I wanted to read like a fast-paced KU style romance because I was reading so many fantasy, and then obviously I was reading horror, so I want to read something fun, I guess, entertaining, if you will. And definitely Credence kind of delivered in that sense. Credence is a contemporary romance that has quite taboo topics. I think that is Penelope Douglas's domain of expertise. They have written so many books that has all of these taboo topics, and I'm definitely curious about them. But yeah, this is my first Penelope Douglas ever, and I gotta hand it to Penelope Douglas. They can write a good tension-filled erotica scene. They know where to push and pull to create enough, you know, heat, enough longing, enough lust, enough wanting. Something that a lot of spicy romance authors tend to like overcompensate in. In this book, I was expecting a lot of spicy scenes, obviously, but I actually like how, you know, we built up to it and how there's just enough of those moments where you're kind of like wanting for more, and I really enjoyed that in a way. The first 2/3 of the book had everything working for it. The atmosphere, we're in, I believe, Colorado, so you've got a lot of like mountains, a lot of snow. We're in a kind of like a ranch, so you've got animals, you've got horses, you've got motorbikes, so it has that atmosphere. Plot, it was decently, you know, it was mildly interesting, mildly intriguing. Character development, we do get quite a bit of it in the first 2/3 of the book, and then obviously the sexual tension, the erotica. Everything was working in the first 2/3 of the book. The last 1/3 though, it kind of like devolved into this madness, and it's not because of the erotica, like it's not because of all the sex, all of the whatever, where like I'm remembering Pucking Around by, is it Emily Roth? I forget. But anyway, that book, that devolved into just, you know, an orgy towards the end of the book. And this one, it devolved into madness, not because of the erotica, but because of this, just the characters. Like, I felt like towards the end, the characters started acting out of character. It's not even out of character in the sense that they've grown or like they've developed into something, but it's just straight up out of character. Things started to resolve so quickly. It feels like we're in this spicy Hallmark movie by the end of it. And I don't know, it just felt so rushed at the end and so confusing and so out of place in a way. Overall, I will still read more from Penelope Douglas, and you will see that I have. This specific book might not be for me, but I do like their writing enough to try again. Just note that this book has obviously taboo topics. In this book, we have our main girl whose parents died. I didn't even tell you what this book was about. In this book, we have this girl who has lived a very privileged life all her life. Her dad is this, I guess, producer or director that's well known, so she's very rich. Her dad has, you know, a new wife, and they decided to kill themselves together because they couldn't, you know, live life this whatever. Like, they had this existential crisis, and they just decided to end things together in like a suicide pact, and they left their daughter all alone with all of this money. And so she's kind of like, I don't know what to do with life, so I'm gonna just chill. She has an uncle, a step uncle, who was kind of like estranged already, but because she's not 18 yet, her step uncle is legally her guardian until she turns 18. So she decides to stay with her step uncle until she turns 18, just to have a different life, because, you know, her step uncle lives in Colorado, has a very, very different, like, from her city privileged life. She just want to try out the farm life. She just want to try the ranch life. And so she did. And her step uncle has two sons, so her step cousins. They live very, very isolated, so they get, you know, snowed in. When the winter came, they were stuck there for like months. And they made, I guess, good use of those months. They had fun. A lot of fun. Together, individually, as a couple. Lots of fun. Just be warned that that is kind of like the situation that you're gonna be going into. I gave this one 2.25 stars. That is Credence by Penelope Douglas. Hi everyone, I'm back. A slight change of background, and I guess my level of disheveledness. I actually had to stop filming earlier because I had an appointment for like a dress fitting, and I was running out of time. So I needed to stop, and now I'm back. I think I left off with Credence in my last clip. So let me just open my story graph. I'm like all over the place right now. The next book I read after Credence is Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. This is quite special because I've actually been reading this during a Wednesday series read-along sprints. The goal is just to really use that time to read my series because I've always been procrastinating on them. I feel like because I own the books, I don't have as much urgency to read them because I could always read them anytime, but that time never comes. So I devised this plan to encourage myself to read the series by doing reading sprints, and so far it's been really fun. A lot of you have been tuning in and joining me in my reading sprints. I don't think anyone's reading the same book as I am, but mostly everyone's just joining in as a regular reading sprints, which is okay. I am down to the last book in the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. More on that in the next wrap-up, I suppose. But yeah, for now, let's talk about Once Upon a Broken Heart. So this book is, I guess, the next trilogy after Caraval by Stephanie Garber. You don't necessarily need to read the Caraval trilogy in order to dive into Once Upon a Broken Heart, but I do think it is my opinion that reading the Caraval trilogy will enhance the reading experience and I guess understanding of the world and the magic system. Highly recommend that. In this book, we are following a girl named Ava. She is heartbroken because the man that she is in love with suddenly gets engaged with her stepsister, and then they get married, or they're about to get married. So she's heartbroken, she spirals, she goes into this church, and says a prayer, like begs for the Prince of Hearts' help. She makes a deal with Jax, the Prince of Hearts, to stop this wedding. Obviously, deals with these fates or these non-human beings never really pan out the way they thought it would. So things happen, and now she's kind of stuck with Jax and working with him in order to uncover this mystery that they encounter. So yeah, that is kind of like the overall vibe. This is 100% YA fairy tale style of book, and I think it really did a good job at that. The writing is very whimsical, very magical. From the world itself, the concept of this Magnificent North, which is a new location, and how the stories are cursed from Magnificent North, because, you know, in this book, all the stories that are passed down from this place called the Magnificent North, they kind of like change whenever you tell the story. So you know how when you say something to someone and then that person says the same thing to, kind of like a game of telephone, at the end you don't really know like which information is real, which one is, you know, added on later. So yeah, it's really interesting take on that concept. And then you also have this fairy tale bachelor that's happening called the Nocte Never Ending. You have this prince who's looking for a bride, and he hosts this balls and events and stuff to look for a bride. And obviously the whole like magic system, the whole thing that we got introduced to in Caraval. But similarly to Caraval as well, I really did not care for our main character, Ava, nor did I care for Jax. More on that later. I find Ava grating, quite insufferable, to be honest, and her thoughts are very self-serving, and she pretends that it isn't, which is fine. Actually, that's like a specific type of character, and I'm starting to think that Stephanie Garber prefers to write her female characters, or at least her main female characters, this way, because Caraval is the same, like in terms of the characters. Yeah, like I said, it's a fresh take for sure, and since heroines are usually portrayed as this unselfish, doing everything for the good of everyone, martyred even. So this is for sure a fresh take on a main character. It does make Evangeline quite unlikable, unfortunately. Jax, on the other hand, is your run-of-the-mill guilty pleasure character. He's slightly different because he's blonde. He's not like dark-haired. He's blonde, but he still has that I don't like you but I care for you type of character. If Jax, the character, made a Tumblr account circa early 2000s, he would have been so popular because of how he views the world, the words that he says, and he's described as looking like an absolute heartbreak, those kinds of stuff. I have so many stuff that I highlighted, that just things that he says that would make like a good, you know, those image quotes on Tumblr that would be like reblogged and reposted. He has this hurt, heartbroken, cold prince persona that, you know, the girlies love. I love. For some reason as well, I kept thinking of Howl from Howl's Moving Castle while reading Jax. I don't know if it's because they're both blonde and they have this very princely kind of devil-may-care attitude. Yeah, that's what's going through my mind whenever I read about Jax. Plot itself is interesting. I am curious about the general beats of the plot, and I do want to know what happens next. But in terms of execution, it does feel like on the younger side of YA. There's a lot of like plot conveniences baked into it. I didn't really mind because I was invested enough in the story and the magic of the world to, you know, keep reading it. And I obviously have read the sequel, so more on that in next month's wrap up. I gave this one 3.25 stars. That is Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. The next book that I read, like I said, I was willing to give this author another try, and that is Penelope Douglas. I read Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas, and I was pleasantly surprised by this book. So in this book, we're following this young adult girl. She works at a bar. She is very hardworking. She doesn't have a lot to her name, but she works hard. She has some goals in mind, and she's also in a relationship with this guy. However, his boyfriend, things have been a little bit rocky recently. I think they went through a lot. They've been together for a while. They went through a lot. They lived together, and one day on her birthday, his boyfriend forgets to pick her up from work, and she doesn't have a car because she used her money to fix her boyfriend's car. Now her car is broken, so she was relying on her boyfriend to pick her up, and so she's feeling bummed. She decided to go into a cinema house to just watch a movie, pass the time. It's like very late at night at this point. In the movie house, she meets a guy, and they kind of hit it off. Very like casual, good banter. They have similar interests, so they kind of have a good time just laughing at the movie, watching, like talking about it. However, something happened. Her boyfriend was, I think, arrested or something like that, and they have to pick him up, and she has to like go get him, and apparently find out that the man that she's been, you know, with for the past hour or two in the cinema is actually her boyfriend's father. So yeah, that is that is the beginning of Birthday Girl. And honestly, I personally wouldn't consider this as like taboo relationship. Obviously, it's unconventional. It's a little bit different. But I wouldn't say that it's taboo. I really quite enjoyed this book because I thought that the main characters had really good development throughout the book, and the pacing was quite nice as well. Everything felt realistic, and you had this, like I said, Penelope Douglas, they are so good at writing tension into the scenes and knowing when to push for the smut and when to like hold back. And this one, I really love that we had that meet cute moment between our main character and the father of her boyfriend, where they didn't really know who each other was. None of those icky stuff that usually comes with a taboo relationship. They were just two people who were interested in the same movie and had such a good time chatting about it. And I really enjoyed that. And I mean, it's very realistic. That could definitely happen in real life. And I like that they were very aware of that, and they were very aware of now the new boundaries that needs to be set because of this unfortunate like connection that they have. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I love the pace. I love the conclusion. It has a little bit of the very romantic big gesture type of conclusion, which I normally am not a big fan of, but it was done in such a way that was kind of like tugging at my heartstrings. And yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I highly recommend it. I gave it 3.5 stars. This is Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas. So now that I've cleansed my palette with some romance, I obviously went back to fantasy and read Silver Under Nightfall by Rin Chupeco. So this book is also part of my 12 Rex 12 Friends challenge. I'm very behind on that, but I'm making progress, which is necessary. In this book, we are following Remy Pendergast. He is a reaper, basically a bounty hunter of rogue vampires. Because in this world, we have humans, we have vampires, and mostly they're kind of living separate lives. There are still some vampires who cross that line, and it is Remy's job to kill those vampires. Remy has a certain pedigree because he is the son of the Duke of Valenbon, who is this legendary bounty hunter in his heyday. Like, he was responsible for creating this balance that they now have with the vampires. So he has a, you know, big shoes to fill in, and he has been feeling that pressure ever since he was born. On top of that, there's some question about his birth because Remy's mother, while she was still pregnant with Remy, actually cavorted with a vampire, and now people are asking, is Remy actually, you know, the Duke's son? Is Remy half vampire, half human? He is dealing with all of this discrimination because of this perception that he is half vampire, and they hate vampires in this world. So there's that. In the beginning of the book, we find out that the third and fourth court of vampires are actually looking to have a peace treaty with the humans. They're working towards this very diplomatic solution to a lot of the vampire-human relationship escalations and problems. So that is kind of like the big political thing happening in the beginning. But something happens. A new strain of disease is plaguing their, are they a country? City, country? And it seems to be targeting humans and vampires alike. So now they must work together to figure out What the heck is this new disease? How do we fix it? There's a lot to love here. You've got expansive world building, vampires, human courts, and then political intrigue, which I'm always a sucker for, and well-developed characters. I got hooked into this book from the first 75 pages. This is a pretty thick book. It's like almost 500 pages or even more. So we've got three main characters. You've got Remy, bounty hunter, vampire killer, essentially human. You've got Zidane and Shaudan. They're both vampires, the head of the third and fourth court respectively. And you've got them all working together towards one goal. I love the tension between all of the three main characters. And, you know, we've got some polyamory here and there. But I will say, I can't quite believe the attraction that they have for Remy. So both vampires, this is not a spoiler, both vampires become attracted to Remy. Like, I can't quite believe how smitten they are. Like, the level of smittenness that they have for Remy, I don't believe it. I think the book did a great job at building each individual character, but the build-up of the initial attraction between those characters, like any combination of them, I feel like it was done off page. I didn't really get to see it firsthand and feel it for myself, which is why I don't quite buy into the attraction that they have. Very insta attraction, if you will. With that said, I didn't 100% mind it because I was very curious about the story, about the political intrigue, about the mystery that they're trying to solve, and this world that they're in. So I was able to like just focus on that and just, you know, have the polyamory as like a bonus. Another thing that I noticed though is that the storytelling seemed to struggle a little bit in juggling the different the different narratives. You've got the rot, which is the plague that I was talking about earlier, the mystery regarding Remy's mother, this mysterious first court of vampires that were extinct but looks like they're coming back. I feel like every single narrative is very segmented. It's like, okay, this chapter we're talking about this narrative, next chapter this narrative, next chapter this other narrative. It doesn't fully feel like they're interwoven, but they are, but it doesn't feel that way while I'm reading it. I'm very conscious of the fact, okay, that right now we're trying to progress this narrative, this plot. I did enjoy my time reading this book, and I am gonna be reading the sequel. I already have it because I pre-ordered it. And yeah, it's also by a Filipino author, so that's another plus for me. I gave this one 4 stars. That is Silver Under Nightfall by Rin Chupeco. The next book that I read is completely different from all of the other books that I've read. I read My Husband by Maud Ventura. First of all, this cover is gorgeous. I love it. I did buy this because of the cover. How do I talk about this book? We're following a woman. She's not named in this book. We're following her and her family life. She has 2 kids and she has a lot going on in her brain. She seems to be somewhat obsessed with her husband, and she's obsessed with how much her husband loves her or how much he should love her. She's always keeping score. Like, today I made this breakfast for my husband, which shows that I loved him this much, but my husband didn't even say thank you, so it shows that he doesn't love me at all. But then suddenly my husband gives me a hug, so I think he loves me. She's like overthinking their relationship and their interactions, and she's very neurotic about it. And that is essentially the whole book. Like, the whole book is just us reading chapter after chapter of all of these things that she's doing, things that she's thinking about, the tests that she, you know, puts forward to check if her husband loves her in a specific way. And we see how it manifests in their relationship, in what she does, and it's controlling her life essentially. And we're just in her head the entire time, and it's intense. And I loved it. There's this one quote in a book that I think kind of sums up the whole thing pretty nicely, and it's, "No one can see my neurosis except me. The way I see myself is not how other people see me. Everything is okay. I belong here." I feel like that quote sums up what this book is in a way, where she's just introspecting a lot, and she knows, she's aware that she sounds crazy, like she sounds insane how she views their relationship and their everyday life, but she can't help it. It's her, it's part of her, and we're just along for the ride. I wouldn't say that there's like a plot to this book. It's really more of just slice of life, but make it literary thriller. I can't decide if it's unsettling or illuminating. Maybe a little bit of both. I gave this one 4.5 stars. Also, that epilogue, chef's kiss. The next thing that I read is not really a book. It's part of a short story collection. I read The Candles Are Burning by Veronica G. Henry. So this is part of the Into Shadow story collection, I think, by Amazon, if I'm not mistaken. I read another short story from this collection called Six Deaths of the Saint by Alex E. Harrow, and I loved that short story. I gave it 5 stars. So I was kind of, expected. This is very short, 37 pages, and it is set in 1950 Savannah. We're following Maggie in 1950 Savannah when her husband dies unexpectedly. It's the very beginning of the book. And we're just following, how her life, how the trajectory of her life has changed, and how she's coping with the death of her husband and, being the sole provider now for her daughter. I can't really say much because it's a very short story, so I think you should just read it for yourself. Overall, I think the main character was really well developed. Like, I could really picture her. She's very tenacious, very resourceful, and you can really feel the love that she has for her family, like her husband and her daughter, and I really love that. Like, we got a really clear picture of our main character, Maggie. The setting itself, the setting and atmosphere of the book was also done quite well. It was very eerie, kind of have this dreadful feeling of impending disaster in a way, because it's set in a city or a town where this small town is being overtaken by corporations, by chain stores, by large companies, and you kind of have this picture of a town that's slowly disappearing into obscurity. For 37 pages, having the ability to draw that out, map that out, is amazing. However, I think the plot itself was not properly paced. It feels like an outline, like a pitch for a longer story that was kind of retrofitted into a short story. What I enjoy about short stories is the ability of a writer to use different literary devices to create a picture, to progress a plot without really sacrificing much. And I think Six Deaths of a Saint did such a great job at that. But this one, I really think that I would enjoy this more if this was a full-length novel. The writing itself, the prose, it was okay. It didn't really grip me. It didn't really make me feel anything. There were some moments where I got goosebumps here and there, but overall, it was an okay read. I gave this one 2.75 stars. That is The Candles Are Burning by Veronica G. Henry. The next book that I read, I don't even know how to talk about this book. I feel like there's so much that I want to say about this book. It's my only 5-star read for the entire month, and that is Babel by Arfcom. I'm so glad that I finally read this book. I buddy read this with Pam from Pam Shenanigans. I actually started this book, is it last year or last year? I read the first 4 chapters, which is about 60-70 pages, and I had to put it down because I was reading this alongside The Secret History, and I don't know who I thought I was trying to read 2 chunky dark academia, very academically written books at the same time. Who was I? But yeah, I finally picked it up again, and I'm so glad that I did, because oh my gosh, this book is just phenomenal. This book is so good. Oh my god, everyone was right. This book is just 5 stars, 6 stars. It's a 6-star book for me. Okay, what is this book about? If you've been living under a rock and you don't know what Babel is, this is a dark academia book. We are following Robin. Robin is, I guess, an immigrant from Canton, China. He was brought over to London to study languages because in this society, in this world, translation plays a big role. the magic, this is fantasy, and you have a magic system that is based on translation. And now the world runs essentially on this magic that is powered by translation. So people who are skilled at languages are in high demand, and they are regarded as very important people in this society. Now, because translation plays such a big part in this magic and it's so powerful, London, essentially, picks up people from different countries with different languages, brings them over to London to, educate them, give them a better life, in exchange for, just their service to Babel, the Royal Institute of Translation. They just need, to do some translations here and there, and they will be taken care of for the rest of their life. However, our main character, Robin, once he gets into Babel, slowly, he was enamored. He loves it. But slowly, the rose-colored glasses starts to crack a little bit. And he sort of sees Babel for what it really is. And now he's kind of in a conundrum. Does he bite the hand that feeds him? Or does he start a revolution for, I don't know, justice? So yeah, that is Babel, kind of like the premise of Babel. And oh my god, I tabbed this so much. This is a lot for me. I loved it so much. I don't really know where to start. I feel like this needs deeper examination, and whatever I say now is still inadequate for how much I really loved this book. I think what I love the most about this book is the depth at which translation is woven within the narrative, within the characters, within the plot, the ending even. Because I think it's such a powerful lens from which we can view the effects of colonialism and everything that happens as a consequence of it. And I know that a lot of people say that it's so heavy-handed, it's so in your face about racism, about colonialism, blah 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 blah. But in my opinion, it should be. It should be, because it's hard to understand. It's hard to really grasp if you're not on the short end of it. If you're not part of the colonized countries or the colonized experience, it's really hard to wrap your brain around why is colonizing viewed so negatively, right? We gave you a better life, so why are you, biting the hand that feed you? Why are you saying that we stole you, blah 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 blah? I feel like it's so hard to wrap your head around that. And even me, I came from a colonized country, Philippines, and we have very deep, very contradicting feelings about the country that colonized us, all the countries that colonized us. And I think this book made me feel very seen. I feel like this book understood me and all of the things that go through my mind whenever this topic is brought up. So yeah, I think this book is so well done, and it really perfectly articulates the conundrum, the struggles that colonized countries, colonized people have, and the enduring effects of that piece of history towards the newer generations. A lot of people have criticized this for being so heavy-handed on the translation. Translation is being talked about in this book a lot, but I actually think that made the book for me, because I like it when dark academia books actually, talk about what they're studying. It's not just them being this privileged, pompous people studying the classics or whatever. We actually go to class with them. We actually learn what they're learning. We actually, examine the concepts, the ideas that they're studying, and I really like that in my dark academia book. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. There's just so many things here that I love so much. I am so excited to reread this book. I'm so excited to revisit and refine my thoughts on this book. I 100% recommend this book, and I know that it's difficult to read. There's footnotes and stuff. It's very academically written, but I think that lends itself well to the subject matter. I think you should give it a try and read this with an open mind. I don't know, it's really hard. It's really hard to summarize my thoughts about this book. Just know that I loved it so much, and I think this is such a great book to study. If this book was a required reading in school, I would have loved it. I would have loved it so much. So yeah, That is Babel by Arfcom. 5 stars. 5 fucking stars. 6 stars. 7 stars. I don't know. It's so good. Okay, I have 2 more books to talk about. One of them is another short story, so we're almost done here. The next one that I read is a short story, also from a short story collection by Amazon. This one is called The Prom by Joe Hill. So this is part of the Creature Feature collection, which is obviously a lot of like horror short stories with some sort of like creature involved. It's really hard to talk about the short stories because they're so short and I don't want to spoil them. But in this book, we are following a family who buys this new house in a small town. They're dealing with a lot of grief because the mother had a miscarriage. So that is kind of like the beginnings of the book, and really that's all you need to know. This book starts off quite slow. It's kind of like just examining their life in this new home and why they brought this new home, and you know, the changes in their relationship as they've been dealing with this grief. But I actually quite liked how slow it started because I think it built up this ambience of eeriness, impending horror, and I think it tackled grief and, you know, the manifestations of grief well enough for a very short piece. It's like, I don't know, 40 pages, is it? Like, it's 46 pages. It ended on such a satisfying note for me, and it has a little bit of that folk horror vibe, and I got goosebumps when I was reading the endings. I think that's a win. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I'm now curious and I want to read like a full-length novel by Joe Hill. I gave this one 4 stars. That's The Prom by Joe Hill. The final book, the last book that I read, which I actually listened to mostly, is A Man Called Ove by Frederick Backman. Now, Frederick Backman is an author that I really love. I've only read 2 books by him, Anxious People and Bear Town. Anxious People, I actually gave that 3 stars, 3.5 stars. But Bear Town is so good. And I think after reading Bear Town, I have come to really appreciate Frederick Backman's writing style. But before that, what is this book about? In this book, we are following Ove. He is an older man. He is, I think, in his 50s or even later, and he's living alone. He's kind of this grumpy old man, and he's a stickler for rules. He's kind of stuck in the past and how things have been done in the past. He hates the internet. He hates the concept of working from home and working at like the computer because he thinks that, you know, work should be, you know, you doing things with your hand, like a carpenter, a plumber, things like that. And he's always criticizing how people don't know how to do things, like they don't know how to change a light bulb or, I don't know, fix a leaking pipe or whatever. He's kind of like stuck in the past a little bit, but as we read this book, we find out the events that kind of shaped him as a person, the tragedies that he experienced, and why he's doing what he's doing now. I don't want to spoil it, but definitely look up trigger warnings. But he's trying to do something, and one day when he was making this attempt, he gets distracted, he gets disturbed by a new neighbor. So a new couple moves into the house next to him, and this neighbor is like very kind, the type who kind of like tries to involve Ove in the community more. And slowly Ove and this new neighbor starts to form this odd friendship and relationship, and it blossoms into something that Ove never expected. This kind of book, and honestly Frederick Backman's writing, is very much a slice of life. Like, he's gonna give us snippets of Ove's life, and we are kind of like left to our own devices to like figure out how that slots into who he is now, how that story fits into the tapestry of his life. And I really enjoyed that because I think this gives us a more holistic look at the person. And Frederick Backman's writing has always focused on the person and who that person is and the things that happen to that person and how that person deals with certain things. And that unique writing style and his unique blend of playful but dark humor and, you know, lots of like reflective and hard-hitting moments, I really like it. I really love it. He really has a way with words, especially when it comes to very difficult topics, difficult emotions, and this book is no different. This book focuses on grief, and there's so many lines that I highlighted. I'm gonna try and see if any of these are like non-spoilery. This one is one of my favorites. Time is a curious thing. Most of us only live for the time that lies right ahead of us. A few days, weeks, years. One of the most painful moments in a person's life probably comes with the insight that an age has been reached when there is more to look back on than ahead. And when time no longer lies ahead of one, other things have to be lived for. Memories, perhaps. I love that. I definitely cried by the end of it. And yeah, that's A Man Called Uva by Frederick Backman. And there you have it. Those are all the books that I read for the month of September. I know that this is quite late, but I hope that you still, found some gems here and there with the books that I've been reading. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I read below. And if you made it this far and you want to comment but you don't have anything to say, just leave a writing emoji in the chat for Babel because, translation. But yeah, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I know this is a long video, but I'm so grateful that you're here, and I hope to see you in the next video coming soon. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Yeah, thank you. See you next video.